The Iroquois Theater Fire of 1903 was the deadliest building fire in American history. The victims, mostly women and children, died in the most dreadful of circumstances, asphyxiated in their seats, trampled upon by a panicking audience, or burned beyond recognition. And it was a tragedy that never should have occurred. Let me set the scene, so to speak. The Iroquois Theater was a new playhouse, all of 5 weeks old. It was a lavishly decorated theater that wrapped itself around a building at the corner of Randolph and Dearborn Streets, where the Oriental Theater is now. It was, its owners boasted, absolutely fireproof. The Iroquois was built to stage huge musical productions, and its premiere offering was a silly musical comedy entitled Mr. Bluebeard. The cast numbered a staggering 280 performers, but that included about 100 extras, mostly youngsters, who were hired locally to portray animal characters. The show's star was a favorite of Chicago audiences, Eddie Foy. He bustled about the stage in the role of Sister Ann, wiggling an unwieldy bustle, often in a direction directly opposite from the way he was moving. Mr. Bluebeard had opened earlier in New York to mixed reviews. The music, critics there said, was loud, the plot ridiculous, and Eddie Foy, one complained, was only intermittently funny. At any rate, he was not so noisy. But the show managed to run 21 weeks in New York. The company then went on the road, playing Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and Cleveland, biding time until the completion of the Iroquois. In Cleveland, a curtain caught fire because of an electrical overload, but it was quickly extinguished, and no one appeared concerned. Despite a series of labor slowdowns that had delayed its completion, the Iroquois Theater opened in time for the Thanksgiving holiday. To help make up for lost time, performances of Mr. Bluebeard were being held every night, and at matinees as well on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Opening night on November 23, 1903, was a festive affair. A glittering tuxedo and ball-gowned audience, most of Chicago's high society, was there. And another incident occurred. But again, nothing was made of it. The theater's ushers, it turned out, had no idea what to do in an emergency. On Wednesday, December 30th, 2 days before Mr. Bluebeard was to close to make way for another musical, the 2 p.m. matinee performance drew a full house, a holiday crowd, so many that there were 200 standees in the orchestra, dress circle, and top balcony, the gallery. In all, the house held nearly 2,000 persons. On stage, peeking out from behind the curtain, Eddie Foy said he had never seen so many women and children in an audience. Even the gallery was full of mothers and their youngsters. It was during the second act that the disaster happened. Started by a short circuit in a floodlight, an almost similar malfunction to what had occurred weeks earlier in Cleveland. The sparks ignited a drop curtain, and soon all the nearly 300 scenic drop curtains were in flames. Foy rushed out onto the stage to try and calm the audience. He called for the asbestos fire curtain to be dropped, but he became snagged while not even halfway down. Then a blast of air shot through the auditorium when a door backstage was opened by fleeing actors and stagehands. It swept toward the ceiling of the top balcony, the gallery, a blast of heated, gaseous fumes. To give you an idea of the horrible scenes that followed, I'd like to read a few excerpts from the book. One of the few survivors who was in the gallery, that is the top balcony, was James Strong. Strong was standing with his mother, wife, and niece in the rear of the gallery. He tried to get to the stairway that led down to the dress circle level, but it was too crowded. So they ran down the aisle by the side of the gallery rows and down a short flight of steps to the middle entranceway. But the door there was locked. Strong threw himself against it without success. He then stretched on his toes as far as he could and smashed the glass transom above the door with his fist. Strong hoisted himself up and threw the transom. But once on the other side in the hallway, He found the door secured with a padlock. Just then another man happened to run by. Together the two of them tried to break open the door without success. We worked at the padlock like crazy men, but could make no impression upon it, Strong said. Nor could we break the door. The other man boosted Strong up to the transom in the hope that he could pull his family on the other side through it. Strong got the upper portion of his body through and saw his family below. But just at that second, he said, the flames swept through the balcony and smoke poured over the transom. Strong felt himself suffocating, lost his grip, and fell back into the hallway outside. On the other side of the door, his mother, his wife, and his niece lay dead. The convergence of those fleeing the gallery and those exiting the dress circle created an impenetrable tangle. With the theater in darkness except for the glow cast by the flames in the auditorium, the panic remained unchecked. Covering his mouth with a handkerchief, 70-year-old D.W. Demick made it down from the gallery to the dress circle. He was shocked. People were packed like cordwood, he said. Demick squeezed past many who were writhing on the floor. He caught hold of the arms of one woman who was alive but lying near the bottom of a heap of bodies, trapped by her feet. He pulled her out. Demick then tried to rescue a man who was also caught by the feet. He braced himself against the stairs to get a purchase and started tugging, but he was unable to pull the man free. Those still upright started down the stairwell, but they found their way blocked by locked accordion gates. Soon as fumes from the burning scenery spread through the theater, the people fell, choking, and died, their bodies creating another pile of corpses at each of the gates. The side of the Iroquois Theater faced a narrow alley across the back of the old Tremont House, a landmark hotel that had only recently been taken over by Northwestern University to house its graduate schools. The commotion in the alleyway attracted the attention of some law students who, although it was vacation time, were studying in a library in the rear of the third floor of the building. At the same time, a group of painters working in another room on the third floor also heard the noise from the alleyway. Together, students and painters carried the planks and ladders to the back windows of a lecture room that faced an emergency exit of the gallery, the top balcony of the theater, across the alleyway. They ran out a ladder across the narrow gap, and a man fleeing the inferno inside the theater managed to crawl across it. Another man behind him tried, but the ladder slipped on the ice-covered sill of the lecture room, and he fell to the ground, lifeless. The painters quickly positioned the planks across the gap between the building and the theater and dropped to their knees to anchor the wooden planks. Come on, they called out. 16-year-old Hortense Lang was the first to cross, dragging her 11-year-old sister Irene. I was going to jump, she sobbed to the painters, but I thought of my mother. Behind them came 13-year-old Carrie Anderson, who was guiding two smaller children across the makeshift gangway. In all, a dozen persons edged their way over the planks. The last to cross was Alice Kilroy, a Chicago schoolteacher. Kilroy was no sooner drawn inside the Northwestern lecture room than a pillar of fire bursting from the theater struck the wall of the school building. Across the narrow alleyway, women and children, still on the exit landing of the theater, died there, the bodies of some dropping to the ground. Firemen rushed into the school and up to the third floor to cross the planks with a hose in order to spray water into the gallery, but the flames made them retreat. With them was Fire Marshal John Campion. Is there any living person here? He called out. No one answered. If anyone here is alive, he shouted again. Groan and make some sound. We'll take you out. Again, no one responded. Campion ordered his men to fall back. As they edged backward over the planks, the fire in the theater billowed once more. A total of 602 persons died in the Iroquois theater fire. Every morgue in Chicago was jam-packed with bodies. Inside one of them, a reporter wrote, in one respect, all the bodies looked alike. The left arm of nearly every victim was held stiff and close to the side, while the right hand was outstretched as if warding off peril. It was such an outstretched hand that attracted the attention of Patrick O'Donnell. Walking through the aisles at one morgue, O'Donnell suddenly stopped to examine a woman's hand that extended from beneath a sheet. On it was the ring he had given his wife for Christmas. O'Donnell knelt and kissed the hand. No one in Chicago celebrated New Year's Eve the next day, Thursday. All dinners, all parties, all dances were canceled. Friday, New Year's Day, was gloomy. Saturday, even grimmer, as victims who had been identified were laid to rest, while relatives still searched among the bodies at the morgues for a recognizable loved one. I said at the beginning of this talk that the Iroquois Theater fire was a tragedy that never should have occurred, but there were many questions raised by it. Why had the asbestos fire curtain become snagged? Without it, there was no shield between the fire on stage and the audience in the auditorium. Who had left the critical ventilators in the skylights above the stage tied down during construction? There was no way that the flames and fumes could exit except outward toward the audience. Why were there no exit signs whatsoever throughout the theater? Beside which, the exits were concealed behind heavy draperies. No one in the audience knew where to go. Why, indeed, was a newfangled lock used on the exit doors? Only one usher knew how to open them, and then only because he had tried to do so out of curiosity. Why, in fact, hadn't there been a fire drill and the ushers instructed about what to do in an emergency? Where did those accordion gates come from? They were drawn and padlocked across the stairways leading to the gallery, the top floor, the top balcony, to prevent balcony goers there from sneaking down to better seats during a performance. And this was a sold-out audience. But the gates were not in the plans approved by the city, and because they blocked the means of escape, they would not have been permitted. How is it possible that so many basic safety features were not in place? Why wasn't there any sprinkler system installed in the theater? Why weren't there any hoses for the standpipes backstage? Why, for that matter, wasn't there any water whatsoever for those pipes? The sprinkler system, the hoses, the water for them, all were required by law. How come a battalion chief inspected the theater, noticed the lack of firefighting equipment, but never felt the need to report it to superiors? Who, in fact, considering all the deficiencies in the building's fire safety, who in the city's building department had ever given the okay, permitting the theater to open 5 weeks earlier? Who then was responsible for the fire? The theater's architect, for not seeing that the exits were clearly marked and accessible? The theater's managers for not holding any fire drills or seeing that the fire hoses were attached and working? Fire department officials for not making certain that all the safety regulations were enforced? The construction company that had not seen fit to check that the ventilators were operable? The city inspector who had turned his eye from all the violations? Who? Who was responsible? Who, in fact, was held responsible?